Hello, Mike Barrett here from testingiseasy.com, and in this video I'm going to share with you my third tip for helping students to feel that you and they are on the same team, which in turn, as I've mentioned in the other videos, will help to break down any kind of tension that might exist between you and them, and which will in turn get them much, much better results and make them a lot more receptive to whatever it is that you're trying to teach them. So the third tip is don't work people to death for no reason. This one really kind of gets under my skin. Let me tell you a little story. All right, I am a fencer and a fencing coach. In fact, you can see my weapon back here, right? This is here always to remind me that I don't do enough practice. So anyway, so I'm a fencing coach and a fencing instructor. And one thing that I see a lot in really substandard coaches is an emphasis on physical conditioning rather than on actually getting better at fencing. You see the same thing in tutors. You know, there's a lot of people who, rather than try to figure out, a way to actually help a student get better at something, they'll just say, well, do 300 of those, whatever it is. Do 300 math problems, memorize 1,000 words by tomorrow. Any kind of just work for its own sake, busy work basically is what it is. And they do this, substandard coaches and tutors do, because, well, for two reasons. First of all, they don't really understand whatever it is that they're trying to teach you about, because while there are some situations in life where repetition and work are the way to get better, those situations are actually few and far between. And when you are teaching someone or tutoring someone, it's much, much more important that they develop an understanding of the underlying fundamental concepts at work in whatever you're studying. That's much, much more important than just repeating something ad nauseum for its own sake. So the first reason is they don't totally understand it. The second reason that they give insane amounts of work like this, frankly, and this is a terrible thing to say, but in a lot of cases it's just because they can. And they are, for the most part, very small-minded people, and they just enjoy the ability to tell a group of people, you have to do this, and then they have to do it, and then that makes them feel big and important. So don't do any of that stuff. There's very few things you can do that will kill, I don't know why I'm stuttering. There are very few things you can do that will kill a feeling of teamwork more quickly than assigning busy work for its own sake. And students can tell when work is busy work. I mean, they're not idiots. They're just like anybody else. When somebody says, hey, do 1,000 repetitions of this thing, 1,000 lunges or 1,000 words to memorize or something like that, they know that there isn't really much benefit to that, right? Just as you would know if somebody did the same thing to you, obviously. So don't do that. Instead, just try to work always from the idea that we're trying to understand what's going on in a fundamental sense. We're trying to get down to basics. We're trying to explain the phenomena that we observe. So for instance, like on the SAT, I would never say to a student, memorize 300 words or 500 or 1,000. I don't even know what people do anymore because I don't care. I would never say to do that. I would say instead, when you see the questions that seem to be about vocabulary, this is what you should do instead. Or I would never say, for a law school student, an LSAT student, I would never say, you need to go home and practice 300 different questions of type A sub 2, or else you're not going to understand questions of that type. I don't even deal in types. Instead, I would just say, here's the basic fundamental underlying things. You do need to practice. I'm not by any means saying you don't need to practice, but practicing for its own sake, just so you can make some poor 16 or 22-year-old miserable and feel better about yourself, I mean, that's horrible. Nobody likes that, and they're not going to like you. And it's not so much that you should care whether they like you, but if they don't like you, they can't learn from you. Very, very important thing to understand. It is much easier to get people to improve when they feel like you're on the same team. And when you're on the same team as someone, you don't rub their noses in the fact that you can make them do extra work for no reason. Now, there are times, certainly, when a student has to practice something a lot to get better at it. And you should not shy away from having them practice a lot if that's necessary. But when you have them practice, explain to them what it is that they should be practicing. Just doing this rote repetition over and over and over again, if you don't know why you're doing it, you don't know what you're trying to build up, it's a huge waste of time, and it's a genuinely frustrating thing. It is a huge contributor to feelings of confrontation and tension in the teacher-student relationship. And as we've said many times, you don't want any of these things. So By no means am I saying don't give people work to do. You should give them work to do. I give my students work to do. But when I give my students an assignment, it is based on understanding the fundamentals. I'm much more interested in quality than quantity. This is especially useful if you work with high school students, college students, or professionals. People who have family lives, anything like that. You don't want to give people 20 hours of work to do when half an hour of good, serious consideration would get them to the same point. Because all that's going to do is eat up their time. They're going to do the work less well than they would ordinarily do it. They're going to hate you. They're going to dread the next time they talk to you, which means they're not really going to learn anything from you. It's just negative on top of negative on top of negative. On the other hand, if you approach the student and say, this is what you need to understand, you probably are going to want to copy it or repeat it a few times. But every time you repeat it, be thinking about this and this and this, and see how these things work together, and just sort of feel that as you continue to practice. Then there will be less practice, and more importantly, the student knows that this is not busy work. This is something they need to do. You've communicated with them on a not exactly equal footing, but you've at least tried to explain what you're doing. You've at least communicated, I understand that your time is valuable, and it's important to me that you don't waste your time for no reason. But this is still why I think you should do this. Don't be one of those arrogant snots who says, well, I've got this room full of people and I can make them do 100 sit-ups right now if I feel like it, and just have them do it, so you can feel like someone who can make people sweat for no reason, right? And don't say, oh, you need to read 3 novels to write your SAT essay over the summer, if that's not actually true, which it isn't, right? Don't give people work for no reason. Everybody hates that. And if you've been doing it because you like to feel superior to your students, you're a bad person. That's not good. Don't do that. Snap out of that, please, for everybody's sake. Work to help them understand rather than just making them do mindless stuff because you feel like it. So anyway, that is idea number 3. And in the next video, I will share with you another very important, very useful, very easily implemented tip for helping you and your students to be on the same team, which again will be one of the major things you can do to improve results, which should be everybody's goal. So I'll talk to you then. Thanks. Bye-bye.